I want to welcome you to Business Lecture Series, BLS, which this time we entitled Business Careers in Space. The Business Lecture Series has been a tradition at Glenelg College, and over the years we have had the opportunity to interview leaders in a variety of industries that range from beauty and fashion to robotics, international business, social media, and multiple others. And at the core of our effort, we try to bridge the gap between the classroom and industry. And the way we do that is by bringing in distinguished speakers like today's speaker, who strive to share with us ways in which the pathways for our students to determine what their professional and educational aspirations are. So today we are going to welcome someone who I call a friend and a mentor, who is an expert in the area of space exploration and business in space. But before we begin, and I introduce to you Dr. Autry, I would like to acknowledge our sponsors for the event today, which include GTL, which is the Global Trade and Logistics Consortium led by Dean Rick Hodge over at LA Trade Tech, the Associated Students at GCC, and of course, a business club led by our current student president, Kevin Bartani. I would like to remind our students, staff, and colleagues that extra credit and flex credit is available, and I will be providing flex certifications via email to all of our colleagues at the college, and I will also provide the list of all attendees to their respective professors in the next couple of days, pardon me. Our program will begin with a quick introduction to Dr. Autry's amazing background, and I will follow that with 7 questions for Dr. Autry. Immediately after that, our club president, Kevin, will lead with some questions from the students and our visitors today. And I have to make a quick note that Dr. Autry may have to leave early due to fire warnings in the area where he is today. So hopefully that won't be the case. So let's begin our program, and allow me to take a few moments before I introduce Dr. Autry and just share with you his background and put this information in context to today's discussion. Dr. Autry is an educator in the areas of clinical entrepreneurship, trade policy, commercialization of space, and economics at higher education institutions like USC, the University of California at Irvine, and Florida Institute of Technology. He is also an entrepreneur and technology startup founder. As a scholar, he is a writer, and his work has been published on multiple publications such as the San Francisco Chronicle, Foreign Policy, Wall Street Journal, LA Times, Washington Times, Forbes, and the list goes on. Dr. Autry holds a master's degree in business administration and a PhD from the Merage School of Business at the University of California, Irvine, and he also holds a BA degree from Cal Poly Pomona. Recently, Dr. Autry served on the NASA agency review team and as the White House liaison for NASA. He currently serves as chair of the Safety Working Group on the Commercial Space Transportation Advisory Committee at the FAA, which is the Federal Aviation Administration, and as vice president for space development at the National Space Society. He directs the Pacific Commercial Spaceflight Initiative within the Aldrin Space Institute. You know, as busy as he is, Dr. Autry also finds time to do philanthropic work, and examples of that include his work with the Office of Commercial Space Transportation, which is part of the FAA, on matters that affect space transportation industry. And he also works in the commercial sector with a company called Relativity Space, which actually works on the building of rockets. He is currently developing a destination research and development facility called EBIOS, I hope I'm pronouncing that correct, which eventually plans to deploy a Martian colony. And most recently, as some of you or many of you may have heard, he has been nominated by the Trump administration to serve as Chief Financial Officer for NASA, and as we speak is awaiting confirmation. So I am delighted, and I am super excited that Dr. Autry has made the time to speak with us today. the last thing I want to say before I begin our interview today is to say that I read a piece of information on his biography that touched me personally. And the very reason why I thought he would be more than a fit to be our guest today. I read that his goals are to improve the world by educating a new generation of bold and ethical entrepreneurs. I also read that he feels that he wants to contribute to establish a viable space economy for the benefit of humankind. And with those words, I just want to say, welcome, Dr. Autry, to Glendale Community College. It's a thrill for us to have you today.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here. I appreciate the opportunity and look forward to some good questions from the audience as well as yourselves. So with that said, where would you like to start, Raphael?
Yes, sir. Well, we shall. And before I begin, I just want to say, that Dr. Autry and I, we go back many years when I was his student of economics at the University of California, Irvine, when I was doing my MBA. So that is a connection and the friendship that I share with Dr. Autry. So 7 questions for you, Dr. Autry. And number 1, I thought I would begin by taking you back to your childhood, your teenage years, and just share with you that, popular culture has exposed all of us through Hollywood movies about space, right? Movies like Star Wars and Star Trek. And for me as a teenager in high school, when I took a physics course, that's when I first began to sort of think about my own physical being in relation to my surroundings. I'm wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about how your interest in space develops as a young mind, as a young person.
Sure. For me, I think it was somewhat of an escape valve. I grew up in I would have to say, somewhat dysfunctional home. And my parents divorced at age 5 in 1968. And that was kind of the height of the Apollo space program moments. The first orbital flight to the moon was made at that time, or actually a free return flight. And then the next year, 69, landings were done. And I think I was at a point as a 6-year-old child, basically looking for a calmer environment than the one I was in. And when I looked at the space program on television, I was just enraptured. And I think it promised an aspirational and better future. And it was a place where I saw people doing things very carefully and methodically and successfully. And I began to really inherently, I think, although I was just 6, appreciate the management of that process and the engineering that was involved, and just became excited about how could you do something that amazing with that many people. And then, when Buzz and Neil stood on the moon, that was just a transcendent moment that I remember. It's one of the first important, really strong memories that I have.
Sure.
And like a lot of people my age, I think we all thought we would become astronauts or engaged in the space program. But later on, when my career days occurred in the 1980s, we were in a downturn in space exploration in the early 1980s, and there weren't a lot of jobs or opportunities there. The Apollo program had been cut back early, and the shuttle program was just getting going, and there wasn't a lot of opportunity. So a lot of us went into software, and that's what I did. So I went into computer video games and software development. I started a company in high school that kind of took off when I was an undergrad. And so that was always in the back of my mind, though. And so I went back to space later, as did a number of people in the software industry. It was really interesting. I remember 1981, we'd sit around at a party after a computer conference and discuss, if I made $1 billion in the software industry, what would I do? And the answer was I would start a commercial space program. And what's exciting is some of the people who did a little bit better than I, in fact, did that. And I followed them along as well. So it's always been there.
Sure, sure. I can see how that sort of organic growth happened for you. And as I did my research and preparation for this interview, I read that you indeed began your career as a software and network engineer, and that eventually you founded several technology enterprises. I'm wondering, for question number 2, if you could tell us a little bit about how your early inspirations and affinities for space translated into your own personal success. How did you become an entrepreneur? And perhaps share with us a challenge or 2 that you had to face in that process.
Yeah, again, I think I was driven in technology by what I saw in the space program. And the technology that was most readily available to me in the late 1970s was the early microcomputer industry, which was just getting started. So I gravitated towards that, and friends and I began to program video games. And I launched a video game company in high school that was moderately successful. It caused me to drop out of my undergrad degree, which is interesting. I was a CS major at UC Irvine. And I just kept signing up for new classes that looked interesting in the course catalog, but at the same time, I was running the software company. And all of a sudden I was making $10,000 a month, and that's $19.91. So that'd be like a freshman making $30,000 a month now. That was rather distracting.
Right.
So I do have to tell my students today, I dropped out with a 0.785 GPA as my first attempt at college.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
I later went back and finished 3 degrees, but you can always turn around a disaster in your educational career. I'd like to share that with any students out there who might be having their moments.
Absolutely, absolutely. Taking a bad experience, learning from it, and moving forward. In business as an entrepreneur, and it is my understanding that you are a serial entrepreneur because you have founded several companies. Could you share with our students and our audience today what a specific challenge, specific situation once you became a successful business person that made you feel, that perhaps made you hesitate in moving forward, or stop you in your footsteps and made you reconsider what you were doing?
The first one was in my very first business. It was a company called HAL Labs, and we made a computer program for the Apple II computer, which looked a lot like Pac-Man, which was a popular arcade game at the time.
Yeah, yeah.
And at that moment in time, the way that intellectual property law and software was laid out was you could copyright the source code to a computer program, but you could not protect the look and feel of the program. So if reverse engineered Pac-Man and made something that looked like Pac-Man you could play on the Apple II, and I'd never seen the original code from the Japanese programmers at Namco, that was legally acceptable at the time. So our program definitely was trying to give people the opportunity to play Pac-Man at home, which didn't exist. There was nobody providing a legitimate product. Then Nolan Bushnell, who was the founder of Autry and really the person who started the video game industry, went to Namco and licensed Pac-Man for the American home market specifically, and he decided to enforce his right to that software beyond the source code and to include the look and feel of the program. And so we were at a computer show demonstrating our wares, and people, executives from Autry and their lawyers showed up asking us to stop doing that. They had a cease and desist order. And I remember I was 18 and I'm like, what is this cease and desist order?
Right.
So this really could have stopped us because they were going to shut down our very successful business that was making me so much money. But the interesting thing that happened, and there's a huge amount of luck in entrepreneurship, I've got to tell you that. And it just so happened I was being interviewed by a gentleman. His name was Jerry Pournelle. He was a famous, at that time, science fiction author, but he was also the top computer journalist in the country, wrote for a magazine named Byte Magazine. And he was right there when this happened. And he just quietly took note And then he wrote an article and came out a couple weeks later entitled Autry Leans on Entrepreneurial Teens.
Mm-hmm.
And made the Autry lawyers and suits look really bad for picking on these young entrepreneurs. And I got a call back that said, we didn't mean to say that we're going to sue you. We meant to say that we wanted to purchase your software. And so, we just ended up in a really good situation where we were able to actually take our package and hand it over to Autry, and it later became the official Pac-Man for the app. In fact, amazingly, I have one here.
Oh, I would love to see that.
So here was our packaging, which is essentially a folded piece of 4-color print paper, shrink wrap, and then later the official Pac-Man, but it's the same software.
Wow.
I was happy to do that. That was probably one of the most daunting moments. There were many others. Entrepreneurship is fraught with moments of glory and terror. Tax audits and crazy things with employees and managers. I could go on, but that was stuck in my mind.
Thank you for sharing that. It makes me think of my experience as an educator now for the last 10 years, where students often come up to me and ask me the question of, how do I secure a blueprint for my app, or how do I secure the rights to my script that I just wrote? And I'll share with you that over the last 3 or 4 years, I have been entrusted with the project of teaching our students IP law. And not being a lawyer myself, at times it's challenging, but for your comfort, and so that our students and audience know that the challenge that Dr. Autry had to go through may begin to decrease moving forward, is we're beginning to impart education on IP. And there's a great deal of effort that is out there. The Michelson Foundation, you may have heard of, and if you want to look it up, the Michelson Foundation offers tons of information for free online for young entrepreneurs and people who may be facing the challenge that Dr. Autry faced a few years ago when he began his career as a serial entrepreneur. Well, thank you for sharing that experience, and I'm happy that all worked out, because as an avid Pac-Man, aficionado myself, I don't know what my life would have been in high school without Pac-Man.
Definitely on Pac-Man machine now in my own little arcade, but I do have to add to that. When I was at this moment, there were no undergrad programs in business, basically. It was extremely rare things. There were MBA programs, but I had no exposure to any formal business training, and I didn't know where to get it.
Wow. Well, you have done amazing work at turning situations around for you, and we can take all that as an example and get some kind of pride in the work that you have done, and inspiration to turn situations around. Dr. Autry, question number 3 we have is related to your nomination. So you have been nominated to the key administration post of CFO at NASA, and NASA, that being the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. Wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about what this work will entail in relation to building our economy, or the global economy, and policy making. I know that's a two-pronged question. So once you are confirmed, if you are confirmed, what will your job be like? What will you have to do? What will you do that will enhance our economic efforts and our policy making processes?
Well, to be clear, the job of CFO is not explicitly a policy job. And because of my coming nomination, I'm steering pretty widely clear of any specific policy comments on anything that's happening now or likely to happen. The job of the CFO in a government agency is to manage the finances of that agency, much like a CFO in the corporate world. And it was the CFO Act of the 1990s, specifically titled that created these offices to try to make government agencies more accountable to the taxpayer and to Congress, who appropriates the money, to make sure that, in fact, agencies were doing what they're supposed to be doing. Because very often before that, they were fairly self-managing, and they would take money from Congress and go off and do whatever they wanted and move things around less properly than they ought to have. So the Office of the CFO at NASA has 1,800 people working there, 1,200 civil servants and 600 contractors, managing a budget of $26 billion spread across 10 NASA centers and several other facilities. These are locations like the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, Houston Space Center, where the manned space program is headed, Jet Propulsion Laboratory, we're all familiar with here in Southern California.
Right.
Ames up in Northern California, and the Armstrong facility out in the Mojave Desert. There's an awful lot going on, an awful lot of programs. Each of these programs has appropriation funding from Congress. Each of these programs is also subject to apportionment of this money by the Office of Management and Budget, which is an administrative group in the White House that helps decide when this money should be applied, to make sure that not only are you doing what Congress said you're going to do, but that you're doing it on a particular schedule, to make sure all the money doesn't go in at once and get spent, and then you come back to the well asking for more. So managing that process, working with Congress, working with the OMB, under the guidance of the NASA administrator, who is setting the overall goals and objectives under the appropriations of Congress and the plans that the White House had made. So it's a interesting place to be, where all of these things come together. The good news is NASA does this really well. It's been one of the most successful organizations as far as its financial accounting and reporting. The audits, in most cases, conducted by GAO and other government agencies. NASA has performed very, very well in almost all categories. So I'm happy, should I be selected, to be coming into an agency that is doing well.
Right. And you are a CPA, am I correct?
No, I am not.
You're not a CPA. Okay.
To be clear, government accounting is very, very different than CPA accounting. And there are 1,800 people in this organization who are very good at that. So the CFO of NASA isn't sitting there doing the books. The CFO at NASA is a manager and a leader whose job it is to make sure that and the reporting gets done fine. So I'm an MBA and a PhD.
Right.
If I had to say why I'm appropriate for this job right now, it's because right now the agency and government broadly is engaging in a lot more public-private partnerships and contracting mechanisms with the private sector. And I bring a lot of insight from that perspective in.
Sure. But it is my understanding that there is no CFO currently at NASA. Is that correct, or am I incorrect on that as well?
No, there's nobody with that title. There's an acting CFO who is the civil servant in the office of the CFO, who's doing a fantastic job. And the acting before that, who was appointed, she's moved back to her original position about a month ago. She did a fantastic job as well. So everything carries on in government. It's not unusual to see these gaps in political appointments, unfortunately, because the process of getting through that and making sure everybody's comfortable with the nominee in the Senate approval takes time. And this year, not surprisingly, everything has taken much, much longer than one might choose because it's 2020.
Of course. Well, thank you for that. We'll move on to question number 4. And this relates to the success that you're referring to within NASA itself. And I'll take you back, and this is just based on my research. Correct me at any time if the information is incorrect. But in my readings, I came across a publication from 2011, a paper that you wrote or helped write for the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics Space 2011, in which you, quote, argued that public investment in space technology was justified by future economic, societal, and environmental returns. That's one piece of information that I want you to bear in mind for a second. And the second is that in 2016 and 17, during the presidential transition, you worked with a team, an agency review team that helped sort of increase budgets for NASA. And the report I read said that your work and that of your team resulted in a series of budget increases for NASA. with these two ideas on mind and your own affinity for space, what are your thoughts on the future success of NASA? And along those lines, how can our students get their foot in the door to take advantage of these opportunities that are being created, not only because the budgets are greater, but because also the interest of leaders like yourself is vested in the growth of the exploration of space?
Good question. Well, first of all, I can't take credit specifically for the budget increases, although I am very pleased that the agency review team I served on suggested that there be budget increases, and we got support from the president and the vice president, and importantly, bipartisan support from the House and the Senate, and that's been really good to see. I think that a lot of people understand the value and not just immediate job creation that you see going on in the space sector, and there's plenty of that, which is good news for your students. Here in Southern California, you've got SpaceX, you've got Rocket Lab, you've got Virgin Galactic and Virgin Orbit, and dozens of other companies, Relativity Space in Long Beach, Maston Space Systems, Mojave. They're all hiring. They're venture capital investment. They're getting contracts to do great things in the private sector. They're getting contracts to provide launch services and other support for companies around the world. And they're getting work from the U.S. government and DoD, NRO, NASA, and other government agencies. It's a good time to be in space. So I would encourage your students to look at the space industry, both potentially working in government service at a place like a NASA center or in DoD. The new Space Force has been stood up, and there's opportunities. If you want to consider Air Force ROTC or going to Air Force OTS Officer Training School after college, great opportunities there. A couple of programs I would like to call out while I have the chance, though. If you're a young lady interested in space, the Brooke Owens Fellowship, that's Brooke, Brooke Owens, OWENS Fellowship, Google that. This is a program designed to help get a little more diversity in the space world. The space world, unfortunately, looks a lot like the movie The Right Stuff from the 1980s in some ways. It's dominated by older white males like myself, and what can we do to diversify? So Brooke Owens is focused on that. It sets young ladies up with mentors in the space industry, and the level of these mentors is amazing. I mean, these are CEOs, CFOs, and presidents of companies that become your one-on-one pal for many months during this program. They also provide you with education and other resources. So check that out. Another program that has just been launched, and I really want to give a hats off to Mr. Will Pomerantz at Virgin Orbit in Long Beach, who has launched this news program and who also helped launch Brooke Owens. The new program is called the Patty Grace Smith Fellowship. That's Patty, P-A-T-T-I, Grace, G-R-A-C-E Fellowship. And I'll send you these links. Perhaps you can share them with your students later. The Patty Grace Fellowship is aimed at Black students who would like to enter the space world. Patty Grace was a good friend of mine and somebody I consider to be one of my mentors in the industry, an African-American leader who ran the FAA's Office of Commercial Space Transportation and licensed and permitted the first commercial human space flights that ever happened out of Mojave, California in 2004, and was really a leader in making commercial space happen. Unfortunately, she died of pancreatic cancer a few years ago. I was pleased to see this named after her. So those are two good opportunities. Otherwise, if you don't fall into either of those categories, I would consider joining some of the many great space organizations out there to connect with people in the industry. The National Space Society, where I serve as Vice President of Commercial Space Development, is a great organization that is focused on human spaceflight and space settlement. The Planetary Society focuses on kind of the robotic space probes that are going off exploring the planets. The Mars Society, run by Dr. Robert Zubrin, is focused on colonizing, settling Mars. The Moon Village Association out there is a group dedicated internationally to bring an international group into building a permanent settlement on the moon. Each of these organizations has very highly placed executives and former government officials in them who care about these topics and are helping run these organizations. If you get involved in these organizations, you'll find the opportunity to go somewhere in space. Lastly, in LA, every year over at the Science Center across from USC, where I used to teach, there's a party held every night called Yuri's Night. That is Y-U-R-I, named after Yuri Gagarin, the first human being in space. And that party usually happens in April to mark his first space flight. Great place to go if you want to network in space, and fun.
Wonderful. Sounds like it. Wow. That's, pardon me, quite an array of opportunities for our students to peruse. Thank you so much for sharing that. Pardon me. Along those lines, Dr. Autry, as I did my reading and, thought about this interview and how we can be of most benefit to our audience, I started thinking about space as a place of opportunity for entrepreneurs and for business people, for scientists and the like. And it kind of made me think about the internet when it first came of age, right? How it became this breeding ground for opportunities for startups and the dot-com era and all of that stuff back in the 90s and the 2000s. Within the context of space opportunities, I'm wondering if you could list for us some specific jobs that our community college students could aspire to. So you've given us information on organizations that they can look at. Specifically, in my reading, I found that there will be opportunities for space data analysis, for the building of software and hardware. Wondering if there are specific jobs that you could name that students can prepare for to follow in your footsteps.
Okay. Well, one of the things I would do is simply go to some of the space companies and look at what they're hiring to begin with and start thinking about that in advance. So go to the Boeing site, go to the Lockheed site, go to the SpaceX site and see what they're looking for. But I can tell you that the software side of the business, the data analyst, the big data side is really booming, because you're going to generate huge amounts of data that has to be turned into actionable information. And let me kind of describe that. You're probably used to looking at Google Earth or Google Maps and the satellite view. And if you go look at your home, you'll notice, gee, that picture wasn't taken today because, that car in the driveway is different than the one I have now, or, there's snow on the ground and it's July. Those pictures are 6 months, sometimes 3 years old, because we do not, unlike drama TV series, we do not have satellites that can take a picture in real time of any point on Earth we want to see. Even the government can't do that. You see them sitting in that room, they're like, let's zoom in on that house, and miraculously they have a picture right when they need it. That doesn't exist yet. But the good thing is commercial companies are starting to do something about that. And so you've got several companies, notably a company called Planet, launching constellations of hundreds, potentially thousands of satellites, so that there will be enough flying by at any one time to be able to get a picture of every spot on Earth every day, if not perhaps every hour. This is the cadence of photography. What this means is just a huge multiplier in data. Instead of seeing one point on Earth, occasionally we're going to have vast amounts from several different views in a variety of different frequencies: visible light, infrared, what's called side aperture radar. What do you do with this data? Well, you can do amazing things.
Right.
So, for instance, you want to track wildfires? Great. Wouldn't it be if somebody wrote an app that would look at images and decide whether what it was seeing was, in fact, a wildfire being sparked and bring it to the attention of the appropriate agencies? Also, if you knew that and you were a stock trader, there might be valuable information in what was going on, or there might be valuable information in knowing how flooded the fields in a certain agricultural zone were after a rain, or whether they were disrupted by winds or a drought. And the farmers want to know that too. If I'm a farmer in the Central Valley, are my crops getting equal water? Well, if you analyze the infrared data, you can do that. But it's not just looking at pictures. People aren't going to look at all these pictures. Software is going to look at all these pictures and decide what is actionable within them. And that data can then be sold to the right people. Maybe if I want to invest in retail stores in a normal circumstance, I would want to know how many cars were in the mall parking lot on a particular day, which stores they were parked in front of, right? That's data. Right.
Yeah, I learned that the specific careers will be available or could be potentially available in areas like finance, defense, infrastructure, and the environment. Are there specific degrees, Dr. Autry, that our students could consider? My take is that any degree in science would apply directly to careers in space, but are there any specific degrees that you would endorse both at the undergrad and graduate degree levels?
Sure. So, I assume some of your students are going to potentially be transfer students. Some are 2-year students and some are 4-year students. Is that correct?
We have 2-year students who transfer to 4-year institutions.
Okay. In that case, then the top degree is aerospace engineering, without a doubt. So look at that. There are a number of good schools in Southern California, and of course, anywhere in the country, but Cal Poly Pomona is a great school for that. Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, USC, where I taught, has a great program. That's probably your best degree if you're generally interested. That said, these companies need everything. They need finance people. So if you want to go to accounting, or you want a general business degree, they need marketing and salespeople. So if you're a company like SpaceX, you're selling launch services, you need somebody to go out there and find international customers who need their satellites launched, and you do that. Companies like Boeing has a new commercial human spaceflight capability with their Starliner coming up. They wish to market that to people. So there's a marketing angle. So there's just about any job in a normal business you're going to see in these businesses. People designing spacesuits. So there are actually people who's, are in the apparel business and have studied fashion. There are people designing environmental and life support systems. So biology is a really important degree. And of course, there's the science of space. So anything to do with, electromagnetic radiation analysis. So anything in the area of practical physics as applied chemistry, lots of opportunities there. There's honestly no degree you probably couldn't find a space job for. But right now, I would say the top ones: aerospace engineering and probably business degrees.
And a business degree. Thank you for sharing that. Well, moving forward to question number 6, and this is a question that really is personal. I came up with this question just because as an avid admirer of space and an aficionado of anything related to space, over the last 10 years, I have been asking my marketing students to write a marketing plan for travel into space. And it's amazing the kind of answers they have come up with, but not being a space person myself, I can just, review their work and think, well, how creative, but I really have no notion of how to grade that as a failed assignment because I don't have anything to compare it to. So my question to you is this: if you could give us an update on Blue Origin and Virgin Galactic, who are the 2 companies that we see in the news all the time, when do we expect to have commercial flights? When do I make my reservation? And what can you share with us about who can and cannot travel into space as a vacation, as a vacation destination?
So there's a couple of broad categories of space tourism. The first is suborbital spaceflight, where you'll take a brief up and down flight out of the atmosphere, see the curvature of the Earth, experience a few minutes of weightlessness, and come back down. This is similar to the flight that the first American astronaut, Alan Shepard, made back in 1961.
Okay.
These flights are going to be offered very soon by Virgin Galactic, Richard Branson's company, be operating out of a facility called Spaceport America in New Mexico. in a town called Truth or Consequences. And
Okay.
Blue Origin, Jeff Bezos's company, operating out of a large ranch that he has purchased in West Texas. It's interesting to see that the two systems use different physical designs. The Bezos system is very similar to Alan Shepard's flight. It's going to be a vertical rocket launch with a capsule coming down on a parachute. And the Branson Virgin Galactic system is more of a space shuttle type thing. You'll be carried by a carrier plane up to 50,000 feet, and then the spacecraft, which is winged, will take off, go into space, come back, and land on a runway like the space shuttle did. Two very different experiences. I think they'll both be cool. Branson has already sold several hundred tickets. He actually stopped selling them a while ago, and I believe they've restarted now. The going price is $250,000. So that's a lot, but it's not inaccessible to somebody who's moderately successful if they're willing to give up, quite a bit. You can't buy a condo in Southern California for that price anymore. And I know people who have, in fact, mortgaged their homes in order to take these space flights. So it's accessible to the middle class, but very expensive. Now, the good news is, like most technology things, I'd expect these prices to drop. The Bezos team has not set their price. It'll be interesting to see whether they choose to compete on price initially or not. I don't know. But that's a very important strategic choice, and business students should think about that and watch what happens.
Right. When would you expect the commercialization of these vacation trips to become a trend? Much like we fly into Paris or New York today, how many years away are we from seeing this become a trend?
The suborbital flights will be very popular next year.
Next year. Wow.
Yeah. Now you mentioned traveling. So the next thing you can do is you can go up and come down somewhere else. And so this is called point to point.
Okay.
And basically like taking an ICBM from, say, North America to Asia, but with a peaceful payload. And you could fly out of the atmosphere into space and come back down. You could go from, say, Taiwan to Los Angeles in 45 minutes instead of whatever it is, 11 hours probably now. This revolutionized travel, and Virgin's looking at it. SpaceX has said they're looking at that. I suspect Blue Origin is considering that as well. Then the third thing is orbital space travel, where you go up into space and you stay there for some amount of time. You go to the International Space Station, which can accommodate an occasional tourist or two. And in fact, a private company called Axiom has been granted access to a port on the space station to attach their own module, which might be a little space hotel that would take passengers coming up on a SpaceX capsule or a Boeing Starliner capsule and dock to the space station and spend perhaps a week on the space station. That's going to be a whole lot more money. Guess what? There is one person already signed up to do this, according to the rumor mill, and it sounds very believable. Do you know who that is?
I do not.
It's Tom Cruise, and he'll be going apparently next year on a SpaceX capsule with Commander Michael Lopez Alegria, who's a good friend of mine, and I'm excited to see Mike fly again. We call him Mike LA in the industry, so I hope that's the case.
Oh, wow. Okay.
The price has not been revealed, but the last tickets to the International Space Station that were sold by the Russians to people that wanted to go ranged up to about $51 million. So there were a handful of folks that got to go in the 2000s under that program on a Russian governmental program. Well, that's happening. The price will come down. I think you'll see suborbital flights in the tens of thousands of dollars within a decade, and orbital flights will still be expensive, but less than $50 million someday.
Right. In the absence of the Concorde, I guess the Concorde flights, this would be a good option, I suppose, in the interest of saving time. Wow, you have left me speechless. I will be thinking about this particular answer to your question for hours to come. Well, my question number 7, and my last question for you before our business club president takes over and asks questions to you, is one that you probably already elaborated on, and that is, this is a standard question I ask of all of our guest speakers, and that is, are there any specific resources? I know you already elaborated on companies that they can look at, but any websites, any organizations, specific individuals that our students could contact in an effort to learn more about careers in space?
Yeah, I'll send you a list that you can share. But as far as journals, I would look at the New Space Journal, which is a peer-reviewed research publication dedicated to just space if you want something more serious. The AIAA, which you mentioned earlier, publishes journals and proceedings of their conferences. That's the professional organization for aerospace engineers. Websites, there's some great news websites, a lot of them out there. So I hate that I can't list them all, but Space News is probably one of the top ones. Space Now, Parabolic Arc. I could go on, there's a lot of them, but check out Space News, and I'll send you a list of more resources there.
Thank you.
And I already mentioned several great organizations, but I'll send you some links to some others.
Sure. And I had a question here in parentheses that I thought I would ask only if I had the time, and it looks like we're doing okay on time so far. In reading about space, the notion of the democratization of space, wondering if you could explain to us what that means. Because when I think of that, I think of, well, when the Americas were discovered 500 years ago, and countries like Spain and Portugal and others, rushed over to explore and create an economy and find new resources. What does democratization of space mean?
Sure. You're talking about development of space to begin with. And if everybody's included in that development, then it's certainly more democratic. Whereas up until this point, anything that was developed in space was a governmental project, and that didn't give individuals much of an opportunity. It didn't give individuals who were not in nations that were spacefaring nations much to do at all. So the commercialization of space provides a lot of access. So when you see some commercial payloads going up now, it's amazing how internationally diverse there are, and the fact that there are payloads going up from community college students and high school students and just even sometimes individuals who want to put something in space, because you can build a satellite these days with a cell phone as its brain and off-the-shelf commercial components for everything else, and put it on a rocket along with 60 other payloads, and not pay millions of dollars to get it flown. It might still cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to get it flown. But it's remarkably accessible. And you've got not just the commercial companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin, United Launch Alliance providing these launches. You've got international groups like the Indian Space Agency launching hundreds of commercial satellites. Lots of opportunity there. The good thing is, unlike the age of exploration, where there was a great leap forward technologically and in global resource development and economic growth that improved the standard of living in a lot of places. There are no, unfortunately, or fortunately, there are no indigenous cultures or individuals that we have to worry about impinging upon in these circumstances. In the previous stage of exploration, it was a circumstance where Europeans essentially went out and settled best parts of the globe. In this case, there's nobody living on the moon. There's no reason to believe there's anybody living in our solar system. There may in fact be biological organisms, very simple ones on Mars, like bacteria or a yeast or something. Haven't found yet. There might be something living under the icy moons of Jupiter or Saturn. We want to be aware of that and make sure that we don't decimate those organisms, or, gosh forbid, bring anything back that would be unhelpful. And there's a science about that called planetary protection that you need to look at. But the good thing is everybody will have an opportunity, particularly with the moon, to go out and strike their fortune. Interesting to observe.
So it sounds like anyone with the correct education, the right skills, the enough resources could participate in this exploration into space.
Yeah. Now, within the context of a treaty called the Outer Space Treaty, which limits some of the things that you can do in space, and the interpretation of that by whatever government that you happen to be operating under. In the case of the United States, I'm very excited about something that's been going on called the Artemis Accords. The folks at NASA and the National Space Council have been signing international bilateral agreements with a number of countries. There were just 8 added on October 13th. Japan, Italy, the UK, Canada are all signing onto this agreement to help work within a specific set of rules to everybody's benefit in exploiting those resources out there.
Sure. And before Kevin jumps in and poses his questions, can you tell me a little bit about your research and the potential colony in Mars?
Okay. I probably won't be colonizing Mars, but there are some people that are working on doing that.
Wow.
Clearly, Mr. Musk has announced that is one of the goals of his company, SpaceX, which is funding that through a series of incremental businesses in the launch services sector and his new Starlink internet system. Dr. Robert Zubrin, who runs the Mars Society, has been dedicated to that proposition for some time, and he holds a conference every year. I was happy to host it last year at USC. A fine lady that I've worked with from Paris, France, Barbara Velvisi, is starting a company called Interstellar Lab, and they hope to build a simulated Mars habitat out in the Mojave Desert. I'm very excited about that. This will be a dome similar to the idea of biosphere, an experiment that was done a while back to see if you can make a closed ecological system work. In this case, a closed ecological system with what's called an ECLSS, an environmental control and life support system, similar to what you see on the International Space Station. This will be an opportunity to provide an interesting tourist experience to fund the project, as well as do real research and help international space organizations learn about how to get closer and closer to a self-sufficient environment. It's not as simple as you think. We might be able to send a rocket and some people to Mars fairly certainly, but right now we don't know how to keep them alive there permanently. There are a lot of great ideas, but none of them have been tested. So this is an opportunity to test that. There's some other companies doing the same thing in that general Mojave area. So that's exciting.
So much to look forward to, it sounds like. Very good. Pardon me. Well, I would like to turn it over to Kevin Vartani now. He's got questions collected from the students at GCC and the audience. Kevin.
Yep. Hello. Pleasure to having you, Dr. Autry. We hope that you're being safe and your family safe during this time. So I have a set of questions that my executive team and I have made, and after that, we will have it open to our chat. So the first question I have for you is, what is one experience in your career that you value and you have learned from?
Wow. Well, I mentioned the Pac-Man experience. Moving, there's so many when you get as ancient as I am. One of the things I have to say is you're going to find yourself, if you're an entrepreneur, being not just a business person, but you're going to find often that you're the mentor, whether you intend it or not, of a lot of different folks. You will find yourself engaged in very surprising things that involve personal challenges that your employees face. And I just would encourage everybody to think carefully about how they can be effective, not just as a business person, but in giving people opportunities. So I recall that I had been running a computer services business that I had started. And one of the things we did in that computer services business was do computer repair for local prisons here in Southern California. So we did computer services for a kind of minimum security facility in Norco, California, and the men and women's prisons out in Chino. And I began to be aware of the challenges that former inmates had in reentering the job market. I had hired a former inmate who had been running computer labs and assisting with other computer work at one of these facilities. And I was aware that this person was good at that. He had the recommendation of the people that he worked for in the facility, and he turned out to be a really good employee. When I went to go sell my company to a large nationwide company, one of the things that surprised me was that they did not want to hire this person. Their hiring rules prohibited hiring anybody that had a felony prison record. And I was suddenly faced with having to let this person go. And I knew what a hard time that this person would have finding another job or telling the buyer of my potential company that, they were going to have to either take this person or pass on the whole deal, which would prevent me from selling my company, which I really wanted to do. Mm-hmm. It was interesting. One of the vice presidents of the company that was buying me, it turned out that he had a private activity as the lay minister in his church, and he would go and in fact go into prisons to try to spread the word of his faith to these incarcerated folks who he thought he would benefit from. And I confronted him on that point, and I said, "How can you be out, looking to be evangelical in prisons and yet not require that the company that you work for hire these folks when they get out? How can they possibly survive?" And that worked. He understood. And we came to an agreement, and I got to sell my company and keep my employee. But you have to stand up for what you believe in. I've always tried to do that. It's not always popular. Sometimes people don't understand the things that you believe in, or they wish to misinterpret them and cast them in different ways. And it may not be healthy for your business career or academic career to stand up and speak out for people who aren't getting a fair shake. But you need to do that at times. You need to find out how to do it politely, though, and sometimes to do it quietly. And it's not always a public scene. Sometimes it's a conversation you have one-on-one with people about their values. It's easier to get somebody to change their mind in that private conversation than it is to go out and lead a protest march and publicly confront them. I'm not saying there's not a place for those things, but when you do that, you generally cause the other side to put up their defenses, whereas those private conversations, very often you can get the right thing done. So I think that's what I would share.
Yeah. So on that note, I remember because after people get released from prison, there have been policies like banning the box, which is questions about have you been in prison during a job application interviews or questions. And a lot of states and counties, they ban it of asking those questions until like a background check and further on. I know that's because of listening to like economic podcasts and writing a paper on that actually. So another question I have is for you is, besides sticking up for yourself, what is another vital thing you can tell students that wish to become future entrepreneurs?
Okay. And to be clear, I'm aware of that current political debate you're discussing. I don't have, and I'm not offering an opinion on that. I do think there are times when businesses have valid reasons to make sure they know who they're hiring for the safety of their customers and other employees. I just encourage everyone to make individual judgments that are ethical and within interest. So, sorry, repeat that next question, Kevin.
So besides entrepreneurs or people standing up for themselves, what is another vital thing you can tell students that want to become entrepreneurs and become self-made in the future after college or whatnot?
Yeah, my main thing is it's going to be okay. Whatever it is, it's not as disastrous as you think. We're sitting here and this year, and we hate the year 2020 for a lot of different reasons. I'm got a fire burning outside my house that might force me to leave at any minute. We've all been through the pandemic. There's an economic downturn that's hurt so many people in so many ways, and many of us probably aren't happy with the way politics are going one way or another, or what we see on our streets. It's going to be okay. You as entrepreneurs are going to learn to take risk, and every day is a new opportunity. Every year is a new opportunity. People have asked me, how is it, for instance, that we can afford to think about sending people back to the moon or doing space science research? And I have to say, how can we afford not to do that? The future is always there. We've got to be prepared for it. In the year 1969, when I was 6 years old, the United States was at war in Vietnam in a horrible way. There were protests on the street every single day against the war. A group of college students in Ohio were shot dead by the U.S. National Guard on the campus during a protest. There were assassinations of major figures, including presidential candidate Bobby Kennedy, civil rights leader Martin Luther King. There were race riots happening in Los Angeles, in other cities during that period of time over grievances that the Black community had. There were a lot of unhappy people. There was also the Hong Kong flu, which killed a pandemic in 1969, killed 1 million people. Okay. And you know what we did? We landed on the moon that year, right? And it was the best thing that happened. It's the thing people remember. Nobody remembers the Hong Kong flu. And all around the world, it wasn't just in the United States, people looked up to that moment and said, there's something good that we can do and aspire to as human beings. And it inspired me, a whole generation of people who, like I said, went off into technology in a lot of different ways. You'd have this phone with your apps. The internet was in fact launched as a project out of DARPA, now or then ARPA, which was a group launched in response to the Soviet Sputnik space launch by NASA and the DoD. So good things will come. I just want entrepreneurs to remember that. Whatever is facing you personally or the world in general, it's going to be okay.
Great. Okay. Another question I have for you is, can you tell us how to pursue a commercial space studies graduate certificate in the program? If you know, you can.
Sure. Yes, actually, I'm happy to teach in the International Space University / Florida Tech graduate certificate program in commercial space entrepreneurship. Normally, we teach this course in the summer at Kennedy Space Center, which is a great experience. You're right there at the launch site. Year before last, we got to see the Falcon Heavy night launch by SpaceX. It was amazing. We get to go see rockets from United Launch Alliance, and we get to go see the Lockheed Orion capsules. We get to see a lot of great stuff. The VAB building, where Boeing is preparing for the Space Launch System to be launched, which is going to be the largest rocket ever launched. Love the program. I'll send you the link, but you can Google ISU FIT Entrepreneurship, and you'll find it. It's run out of the Aldrin Space Institute, and Andy Aldrin and I helped put those courses together this summer, and we got a great group of faculty. Now, that said, ISU, International Space University, provides a really great curriculum at campuses all over the world and online for people that are interested in the space business. And as a graduate program, it's a great place to go to.
All right, thank you so much. What is a typical workday like for you? Would you consider?
There is no typical workday. So I have been a software engineer and a serial entrepreneur in several tech businesses. I have been a full-time college professor for the last 7 years at the University of Southern California's Merage School of Business. Right now, I am unemployed while I wait between that job and hopefully to be confirmed by the United States Senate for the position I've been nominated in. In the meantime, I'm finishing up a textbook on entrepreneurship, 250,000 words, 20 chapters, and doing kind of the fine tuning on that. So I get up in the morning early. I am a early to bed, early to rise person. I try to go to bed by 10. I wake up normally about 5 because that's 8 o'clock in the East Coast time. At the latest, I'm up by 6:30 because I want to see the stock market open in New York at 9:30. And I recommend that, and try to use those early morning hours before stuff starts happening and while your brain at its peak to get good stuff done. So I write in the morning normally. I have not been doing so recently, but normally I write a lot of editorials and newspaper articles and things like that. I'll do that in the morning. Then get some exercise. If your body's not fit, your mind won't be fit. And I work out a lot. My mentor is a college professor, taught me how important that was. And at UC Irvine, when I was a PhD student, I'd go swim in the pool every day for an hour. Get your blood re-energized in the middle of the day. I'm also a believer in power naps. If you can take a 20, 40-minute nap, that's not a bad thing. When I can squeeze that in, I'll do that. Then I turn to work late. I don't have TV. Get rid of the TV. Pull the plug. So I got no cable. I'll admit to watching stuff on the internet occasionally, but mostly I'm absorbing information, looking at the news, looking into research on companies or stocks, trying to learn new things, and read a lot. When I drive, I listen to a lot of audiobooks. So I have a long commute to USC, Linda. That was 42 miles door to door. Listen to a lot of audiobooks. Big fan of that if you have downtime.
Gotcha. Okay. So those are my questions, and we're opening up to the chat, and I already have a few people asking questions. The first question is from Anthony. He says he's a current mechanical and aerospace engineering major who is going to transfer out of GCC next fall. He said he just recently applied for the NASA Community College Aerospace Scholars and is waiting for a response back. He was wondering if you could give him some advice on how he could set himself apart as an engineering student who one day hopes to have a future at NASA.
Right. Well, I don't have anything directly to do with that program, and I certainly would be inappropriate for me to help even if I could, but I can't. That said, I'm glad you're excited about it and encourage you to do it. I don't know what they're looking for specifically in the group that's going to be analyzing that, but I have to say, if you want to set yourself aside, first of all, there's just a basic requirement. You've got to be really good. NASA hires talented, smart people. We all know that. So you've got to do whatever it is you do well. So you're going to have to be a good mechanical engineer and aerospace engineer. That's not enough, though, to be, perceived as unique. What can you do? I think having done hands-on work, get yourself engaged in actually doing some projects in, say, robotics or amateur rocketry that show that you have applied what you were good at in book learning. So it's not just I got really good grades or test scores, or these letters of recommendation from my professors, but I went out and I built this thing, and look, we blew it up, and we built it again, and it blew up again, and on the third time we got it right. That's something that a lot of folks that are looking through stacks of resumes like to see is that hands-on applied experience. Also, are you doing anything tangential to your technology degree that makes the world a better place, right? So are you doing some volunteer work or community work, or do you see a way to use your aerospace talents, to make the world better? You're working on a space solar powered demonstrator idea because you're concerned about our energy future or the climate. Bring that out, right? The diversity thing I mentioned, if maybe that's not you, but you're helping other people who wouldn't normally have access to education and step up in space, that's exciting. So find that thing that is related to what your degree is, but is a little bit different, and you're doing on your own outside of what you're required to do in school.
Okay, thank you. We have a few questions on also our YouTube live stream happening. So one person asked, what was your biggest difficulty throughout the road to getting where you are now?
So many difficulties, it's almost hard to enumerate them. I was raised by a single mom. At times, honestly, I lived in a trailer. I'm a first generation college student. I had, frankly, a lack of appropriate mentoring for where I wanted to go. So there was nobody in my family that could talk to me about what to do with a college career. I had small business people in my family that were successful in regional, local, small service businesses, but nobody knew, for instance, how to get money. So when I started a software video game company in 1980, I was really on the cusp of a huge booming industry. If I had had the right network, I think, like if I had access to the network that I had at USC when I was teaching there and I saw my students had, I'd be a billionaire, right? I would have known what an angel investor was. I had no idea what that was. I had never heard the word venture capital. It wasn't very common in the early 1980s like it is now, but I didn't even know the word, right? So I knew our company needed more money. I didn't know anybody that could come up with more than $500, all right? So we did everything ourselves and we had to bootstrap everything. And I made what I thought was a lot of money, but it wasn't a lot of money, right? So the biggest challenge I had was a lack of network, which is why I love the two organizations I mentioned, the Brooke Owens and Patty Gray Fellowships, because they connect people with a network. What I learned is I had to make my own network, and I became really good at somewhat aggressively but politely connecting myself with people I thought were going in the right direction. Okay. And so my recommendation to you is go out there, connect yourself with people that are going in the right direction. Avoid people that are going in the wrong direction. They'll just get you in trouble or waste your time. But there are a lot of people who aspire to great things. Aspire with them.
Actually, yeah, I think in my opinion, I think a lot of people can agree in business, networking is a key to going or stepping up and advancing and whatnot. So another question I have, which is from our Zoom, it's from Harry. He says, I recently heard that Space Force and NASA will be banding together to expedite the process to the Artemis program. Knowing that these two branches have two different budgets, what other areas of space travel and expedition can we see improvements?
Okay. I have no direct comment on any specific NASA policies or actions going on right now, but I will say that one of the exciting things we see that's happened recently was the new administration stood up the National Space Council again. This was an entity that was originally set up back in the 1960s and was run by the vice president, I believe, Vice President Johnson under President Kennedy was the first person to be in charge of the Space Council. And that continued until the 1990s when, for some reason beyond me, it was shut down. Maybe somebody once said that Al Gore wasn't excited about it. But in any case, that's been brought back up. And the important thing is the Space Council brings together all of the organs of government that are interested in space. So you've got the NASA administrator, you've got the Secretary of Transportation, Secretary of Commerce, you've got DoD representation, you've got Department of Energy, anybody that has an interest in space under a single umbrella headed up by a really, really great executive secretary, Scott Pace, who's done a fantastic job in implementing space policy directives that have come out of the White House to do things like address development in space, to address public-private partnerships, to address national security issues with the Space Force, to address space traffic management, space debris issues. All of those are being addressed in a cohesive, multi-agency way where all the agencies work together. But they are under different budgets, which is a very good point that the questioner made. And that makes it somewhat hard because Congress approves Agency A's budget and Agency B's budget at different times, and they don't necessarily align. Congress needs to also be on board, and in general, they are, with this more holistic view of space, because it's important that we generate jobs, science, and national defense capability in an effective way for the American taxpayer.
Perfect. Thank you. Another question we have, his name is Casey. He says, for marketing majors, how could we impact the NASA institution and be able to perform a marketing career over there?
Oh, okay. What is the most valuable logo in the world? Business school professors like to tell you that's Apple or Coca-Cola, maybe. I think it's NASA. I go all over the world. I see people wearing the NASA logo on a hoodie or a hat or something. Can you imagine that? Imagine if I was in Beijing or Amsterdam and I ran into some kid that had the logo for, say, the US Department of Agriculture. I don't think so, right? No. There's no other government agency outside of maybe the the Park Service, that people really love the way that they love NASA. So marketing should be easy. I think there's a lot to be done, though. The NASA team does an amazing job with getting information out, the NASA TV group and their social media. But there's a lot of opportunity to leverage that even more for the benefit of our country and for NASA. Now, outside of that, though, there's all the commercial space companies. Boy, do they need marketing. Like I mentioned, they've got to sell their services to people. They've got to convince the public that their services are a good thing for the public. And in some cases, they want access to taxpayer funded grants, or they want access to contracts, and they've got to get word out about why they're the right company. So, Boeing, Lockheed, Virgin, Blue Origin, they all need that. So lots of marketing opportunities there.
Okay. We have one final question. His name is William, and he was our former president of the club, and he's now at CPP, a school that you went to. And he's asking, what are your thoughts on asteroid mining?
Oh, wow. Okay. So there's a huge opportunity there in the long term. For those of you that don't know it, you've got asteroids like the one called Eros that potentially have more precious metals on them. I mean, more gold, more platinum than have ever been mined in the entire history of the Earth. And in some ways, they're easy to get to because they're not underground, right? They're just floating out there. You could bring this rock, theoretically, if you could access it and move it to a place that was convenient, then disassemble it, mine it in space, and perhaps bring those materials back to Earth. There's a lot of energy involved in doing that, though, and a lot of complexity. Or more likely, you could make things in space that use these materials that are valuable to people who wish to eventually relocate into space. This is, however, some decades out before it is super practical. I think the moon is the most practical immediate destination because it's conveniently fixed in place very near the Earth. It has all the same elements on it that we find on these asteroids, because you look at those craters on the moon, many of those craters are asteroid impacts. And at the center of those craters, we're hoping that there are still intact cores from metallic asteroids. And there's some data to suggest that. Although there are other people who think that there wouldn't be because they're vaporized. But I'm of the opinion that those metals are there in concentrated amounts, easy to get to in a place very near the Earth. So we might start mining those asteroids first, along with water and other resources that are on the moon. Huge business in the next, say, 10 to 20 years. I think there's an immediate business, and somebody's just going to go get some rocks from the moon, bring them back, and sell them as engagement rings. Essentially, moon rock diamonds. This will be worth far more per carat than real diamonds in the initial moments of the availability of those products. So it's exciting. There were two companies formed, though, Planetary Resources and Deep Space Industries. Both basically failed because their business model couldn't close in the amount of time that any living investor would benefit from them. Mm-hmm. One of the problems you have is, who are investors? Investors are, unfortunately, a lot of older folks who have the money, right? And they like to see things happen in 5, maybe 10 years, because things that happen in 30 or 40 years, they're dead. Unfortunately, people who are 20 don't have billions of dollars usually to invest in projects like this. So it's hard to close the loop. Mr. Bezos, though, in particular, has a very, very long horizon in his investments, and he's talked about these sort of things. And I think he's putting his money where his mouth is.
Gotcha. Okay. So I have one final question before I pan it to Professor Cardona. And just on a side note, for any of the GCC students that are on Zoom, I will be sending the link for the attendance form for you guys to sign. But back to my question, or it's from Jasmine. She said, have you ever planned on going to Mars?
I would sure love to. I am convinced I will get to fly in space before I leave this Earth on a suborbital flight. That's something I should be able to afford in the next 5 years or so, and I'll be doing that. I'd love to go to the moon. Mars is quite a step. If you go there, I don't really think you're coming back. It's a one-way trip, and there are a lot of people, I think, who are older who could see themselves doing that. It's a challenge for a young person to think about living the next 60 years of their life under a dome. But if you're talking 10 or 20 years, that might be more viable. I would think about it. Whether it'll be possible or not within my lifetime remains to be seen. I know Mr. Musk has set a very aggressive schedule. NASA plans to get some folks there in the 2030s and perhaps using the moon as a stepping stone, and I'm excited by both paths. So we'll see. If I can go visit and come back, I'll do that. If I had to go to stay, I'll think about it.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dr. Autry. Myself, my team of execs, and everyone here appreciates your time and your answers. And now I'll pan it back to Professor Cardona.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you so much.
Dr. Autry, it has been a pleasure to have the opportunity to speak with you and an honor to pose these questions to you, which I'm sure will be very helpful for our students to have heard and to digest the answers and the multiple resources that you have cited for us today. I'm very grateful, I'm very touched, and I'm out of words. The information you gave me is gonna have me think about things for the next several weeks. Every time I have a guest here, I hand over a plaque. It's a souvenir with your name engraved on it. And because of the pandemic, I am unable to get this to you because we're doing this virtually, but I will make sure we get that mailed to you as soon as possible sometime this week.
I appreciate it. It's particularly exciting to be in your classroom, Professor Cardona, this time, instead of having you in mind, but it's really good to see you again.
It's a pleasure. It really, really is. Hopefully one day you'll come back and you can talk to us again. On behalf of the GCC leadership and our students who I care so deeply about, I thank you again for joining us in this business lecture series. I wish you the very best of luck with the hearings and the nomination, and I'm going to keep my eyes on the news to make sure that I know what happens and when it does happen.
All right. Well, thank you all very much. Appreciate you including me.
Thank you very much. And to our audience and students, thank you for tuning in, and hope you have gained some valuable information as you move forward with your academic and professional endeavors. I'm Rafael Cardona, Professor of Business at Glendale College. Thank you all for attending, and have a great day.